This is one of those episodes that's going to stick in people's minds for a while, myself included, as this episode did get to me a little bit. Rash decisions were made, and these decisions have consequences. But before I get into that, I will say spoiler warning for those who have not seen episode 12 of RWBY Volume 7, as I will not be showing the episode or any clips from it in this video. Simply images of the episode and analyzing the events that take place, of which there were a couple very significant ones. I will leave a link in the description below so you guys can go to Rooster Teeth first, watch the episode there, and support the series that we all love. Now, in last episode, we saw RWBY give the call to everyone saying that Ironwood was about to abandon Mantle, leaving it to die. And so we pick up with some of the people getting this information. In particular, Qrow, Robin, Clover, and Tyrion is there as well. And understandably, Robin's pissed off at this information. She's been an advocate for Mantle for a while and just gave her full trust to Ironwood, only now for him to turn his back on Mantle and leave them to die. So, yeah, her emotions are understandable at this point. We see on Clover's scroll that he gets a detainment order for all of Team RWBY, all of Team Junior, as well as Oscar, who I believe are just officially known as Team Alpine now, and Qrow. And Clover goes up to Qrow and is honest about it. He's upfront saying, hey, there's the detainment order for you, but he's also intending to detain Clover right there instead of, escorting the prisoner, Tyrion, back to Atlas and then maybe going through with that order. But Clover is a trained soldier. He's been trained to follow orders. This is what he's been doing for a while. I can kind of understand his decision at this point, but Robin's getting increasingly pissed off. Qrow is trying to get everyone to calm down. Let's just go see what Ironwood is doing, why all this came about, what's the reasoning, etc. But Robin just isn't having any of it, makes the first shot. She attacks Clover, and Clover's able to deflect it. A little bit easier than I thought it should have been, but, Robin was just very angry and emotional at the time. Qrow says, you know what, screw it, jumps into the fight and starts attacking Clover as well. So at the beginning, at least, it's Qrow and Robin versus Clover. But, as the fight's going on, it's a very enclosed space, things are going to get broken, and one lucky or unlucky shot, depending on how you want to look at it, from Clover gets deflected by Robin and ends up breaking the handle that Tyrion is bound to, or the thing that's keeping him stuck to his seat. So he's able to free himself. It's not like any of us didn't see this coming, and he just goes straight to attack the pilots while everyone else is distracted. And so the pilots are quickly unconscious, and honestly, Tyrion wearing the captain's hat, just beautiful. I'm glad they included that. And Qrow runs over and asks him, what the hell are you doing? Well, the Queen's work, of course, as he joysticks the plane straight into the ground. But Clover, making the smart snap decisions, is just hops ship before it hits the ground. Literally like a second before it hits the ground, but I guess that's enough time, as then the ship hits ground, and yeah, not looking good for them. But before we see more of that action, we see Penny and Winter, as they just got the information that Mantle is going to be left to die as well. Which, of course, Penny is having some also understandably conflicted emotions about. She was the protector of Mantle for a while, and now that it's just being left to die, well, she's starting to question it. Winter does have conflicted emotions as well, but she's not questioning the order. She understands what needs to be done. Get the Winter Maiden powers to protect the relics, and then keep them out of Salem's hands. This is for the greater good, not just the good of the few. But as Penny points out, what's good about this? Our personal feelings should matter. So there's a bit of, following orders before thinking for yourself, little clash going on here, but they both decide to go on to the Winter Maiden. And then we cut to one of the bigger fights that we've all been waiting for, Team RWBY versus the Aesops, or the Aesops minus Clover, because he's occupied elsewhere. And this is another tense situation. We see the Aesops lock down the entirety of Ironwood's office and possibly the entirety of Atlas Academy. It would make sense that they'd have control over that. Whether they can only, lock down a certain area is another question. But it's obvious that Ironwood has prepared Atlas Academy to be a fortress against any attack. Understandable, but yeah, blast shields pretty much go up around all windows and on the doors, and yeah, Harriet's being a little bit arrogant, saying that, we're the best huntsmen and huntresses in all of Atlas. Do you really think you stand a chance? RWBY being a bit overconfident, but I think it was more to get under Harriet's skin, says, "You were the best huntsmen and huntresses in Atlas until you trained us," which, you know, is a great way to get under Harriet's skin, especially afterwards, as Ruby just uses her semblance and takes off out the door, pissing Harriet off even more, forcing Harriet to chase her, which splits up the Aesops, first and foremost, but you know, Team RWBY has only been there for, what, a month or two? They're also, you know, 19 for Blake, Yang, and Weiss, and then RWBY is 17 currently, so they haven't had as much experience, and they haven't had as much training as the Aesops, but they do have a much better synergy. They are friends. They have complete trust in each other, whereas the Aesops see each other only as co-workers. So that is what they're going to use to their advantage. And so we see the matchups that are going to take place. We have RWBY versus Harriet, we have Yang versus Elm, we have Blake versus Vine, and then Weiss versus Marrow. And it's also good to point out that Marrow was a bit conflicted about this as well. He's like, you know, are we really going to slug this out? Is that really how this is going to go? So he's a bit of the wild card, though, you know, when Team RWBY is ready to fight and they're not going to go down without a fight, Marrow resolves himself to fight as well. And we see Harriet, you know, saying that she had the kids pegged from the very beginning. I'm curious about what she meant by that statement, like what, pegged as traitors? I call bull on that one. Maybe that Team RWBY and the rest of them wouldn't be as eager to follow orders as the rest of the Aesops, but still, you know, I don't really think that that was said in the clearest of states of mind, as Harriet's increasingly pissed off. Her and Elm actually are the most pissed off out of any of them. Marrow's kind of being like, you know, I don't want to fight, and Vine's wanting to go the peaceful route, whereas Harriet and Elm get increasingly more out for blood as the battle goes on. Even at one point, we see that Elm kind of gets a hold of Blake and is holding her hostage. Vine takes the opportunity to say, hey, let's take the peaceful route, we don't have to do this. But Yang also knows how to get under people's skin, where she says, you know, there's no point in negotiating, you're just following orders. Throw back to what Elm said last episode, you don't need to understand orders, you just need to follow them. And yeah, that pisses her off enough that she lets go of Blake, or releases her grip on her, releases her into a wall, but still lets her go, losing the advantage, but just to go attack Yang. So yeah, emotions are pretty high on the side of the Aesops. You know, all this information has happened, things are happening very quickly, but still, Team RWBY has the advantage for being in a calmer mind state, at the very least. We see that Vine's semblance can also be used from his feet as well as his arms. If he can, you know, grab onto things with his feet while using his arms at the same time in his aura vines, you know, that's such a versatile semblance. A lot more versatile than we see what Elm's is later on this episode, as hers has a very glaring weakness. We also see that Marrow versus Weiss is not really in Marrow's favor. Weiss is pretty much outclassing him, able to use ice and fire dust, creating steam, and, you know, able to summon her Armagigas. You know, Marrow's not in the greatest of situation. But before we see this fight continue, we cut to the ship crash, where Qrow wakes up. He seems a bit rattled, but overall okay. The same can't be said for Robin, though, as it looks like she actually got thrown from the ship. She's unconscious and her breathing is shallow, but she seems to be stable. We don't see her bleeding or anything, but Clover's outside the ship as well. And he's completely fine, because he abandoned ship just before it hit ground. And he says, you know, just surrender peacefully and we can get Robin to Atlas and get her some help. Being a negotiator with someone's life, that's something I didn't really expect from Clover, but he really wants to fulfill the orders at this point. He's not happy at how it turned out, but, you know, he says, we don't have to fight. We don't have to be this way. You know, I consider you a friend. And Qrow says, this is what happens with all of my friends. You know, bad luck and such with that, they end up fighting. And so they do fight. But we see that Tyrion's still alive inside the ship as well. Of course he would be, and he's unconscious at first, but wakes up very quickly to hear that Qrow and Clover are fighting, and is able to quickly get out of his bonds. He just dislocates his thumb, relocates it back in. It's no surprise that Tyrion's able to do this, and goes out to join the fray. Or at least walks out and says, don't let me interrupt you. But Qrow makes the correct decision here, and turns to go attack Tyrion. which, you know, he's the serial killer. He's the dangerous one. That's who they should be focusing on. But as Qrow is attacking Tyrion, Clover makes another bad decision. It seems that his most current order is outweighing his previous one, but he decides to attack Qrow, which I think is absolutely the wrong decision, and Qrow even didn't expect this as well. You can see it in the look on his face as Clover used his fishing hook to, you know, latch onto Qrow's weapon and pull him backwards from the fight against Tyrion. And so now it's, you know, all three of them versus each other, and it's just, I don't know why Clover didn't decide to team up with Qrow against Tyrion, which would just be smart, and then deal with their conflict with each other. But instead, Clover ends up getting knocked away at one point, leaving Tyrion and Qrow to talk. Qrow says he has a score to settle with Tyrion, and Tyrion says the same, but also offers this. Hey, you know what? Let's put the kid to bed, meaning Clover, and then we can settle our score. So Qrow and Tyrion end up teaming up. A pair I never thought I would see, which was honestly amazing to see, and they both go to attack Clover. But before we get to see how this all turns out, and it's an interesting way that it turns out, we see the conclusion of the Aesops versus Team RWBY fight. And needless to say, they're all exchanging blows back and forth, and things aren't really going that great. They're actually giving the Aesops a hard time. Harriet is getting increasingly more pissed off. Merrow's saying, hey, you know, I'm trying to detain them here, not trying to kill them. Harriet's saying, they've pushed us to this point. Harriet now intends to kill Team RWBY. So, yeah, Harriet's not very happy. I'm sure Elm is in a similar state of mind, but this is when things start to turn in Team RWBY's favor. Blake and Yang come up with a plan to, well, I'll explain what ends up happening. So Blake and Yang go to attack Vine. They use Blake's shadow clone and Yang's remote detonation bombs to get close to Vine and explosion. He ends up getting sent flying. Yang jumps up, grabs the handcuffs that were on him, throws those handcuffs around him so he can't move his arms, activate his semblance. Though if he can activate it from his feet, I don't know why he didn't at this point. Probably just shock, as Yang pretty much does a couple spins and slams him into the ground, absolutely breaking his aura, and just the amount of force that that man must have felt in that moment. I kind of feel bad for him. He was the one advocating for peace, and he got wrecked potentially the hardest out of all four of the Aesops in that room. Can't really say all of the Aesops in general, as, well, you know, the Aesop that's not there kind of got the worst of it. But that's when the Aesops realize that Team RWBY isn't just a group of children that they're having to fight. These are trained huntsmen and huntresses that they were kind of underestimating. Now it's 3 versus 4, and things just aren't going that well. We see Weiss able to take out Merrow, as his semblance can only work in one direction that he's looking, it seems. We know it can work on multiple targets, as seen in episode 6 when he used it on the entire group of people that were at the party where, you know, all the attacks happened and everything, where Tyrion was let loose. But although he can use it on multiple targets, it's only one direction at a time. Considering Weiss and her Armagigas are in different directions, he uses it on Weiss, the Armagigas can attack. He uses it on the Armagigas, Weiss is able to attack and knock him out. Then it's RWBY versus Harriet, and Harriet is able to get the jump on RWBY briefly and was about to bind her with the handcuffs, but RWBY's semblance, now that she knows it's more than just speed, she can actually break herself apart into rose petals and get behind Harriet, even though Harriet has her pinned. Very useful. She then is able to steal the handcuffs from Harriet and bind her as well. And then we see what happens with Blake, Yang, and Elm, who Elm's just not in a good spot. Since Vine was slammed into the ground, the floor is now cracked, so Elm's semblance of roots, it's strong. It can make her very sturdy, but those roots don't reach very deep. They're just attaching her to the floor. And if the floor is in chunks, well, it's just this little chunk and it's not really doing any good. So Yang activates her semblance, looking absolutely badass, and slams the floor, launching Elm a bit upwards. And then Blake and Yang just, from either side, just wreck Elm. And yeah, Elm's not looking good after this either. And then RWBY and Harriet. Harriet's still not giving up. Even though her hands are bound, she's still using her semblance, her speed, to go after RWBY. I mean, her semblance is speed. She's still got her legs. She's gonna keep going. But the way she's taken out is honestly pretty painful as well, as she's about to make one final charge at RWBY for what I would assume is a headbutt. Weiss just creates an ice wall in between them, and Harriet just slams into the ice wall. This breaks her aura, and we see her eyes roll back into her head, and she collapses unconscious. I'm pretty sure with at least a concussion, possibly some brain damage, like, ow. She hit herself onto a wall hard enough to break her aura. And although we weren't, seeing aura flicker that much throughout the episode, we saw Blake's aura flicker, and then we saw each of the Aesop's aura break. Everyone was still, taking damage to their aura. It's just, animating each and every instance of aura taking a hit would just be a little bit pointless, and also there'd just be aura flickering left, right, and center, so this makes sense, but still, ow. And now we can't say that Weiss has not had any victories at all, because she's defeated Marrow, and technically she took the overall win on Harriet as well, even though RWBY did a majority of the work. So yeah, good win for Weiss and good win for Team RWBY. And then they're discussing, okay, how exactly are we going to move forward with this? We can't use our scrolls, we need to get to Ironwood, and they're just dragging all the Aesops into the center of the room. And then Pietro and Maria show up, and they're just like, oh my god. Seeing this scene, Team RWBY just dragging the Aesops is probably something that they never expected, considering the Aesops are who they are. And now Maria's just saying, well, this is when they ask for help. Now that they have Pietro there, they can have access to pretty much anywhere in Atlas. I wonder how much help Maria's going to be, or what her purpose is going to be in the finale of Volume 7 or going forward, but, we'll see what ends up happening. Then we cut to Jaune, Ren, and Nora as they're still looking in at Oscar's room, saying, he has to be around here somewhere. And just upon walking out of the room, they see Oscar, carrying the relic and everything. And Oscar just smiles at them as Nora runs up, and then another Oscar, who's a little bit more beaten and has some char marks around him, runs up and just punches other Oscar in his face. Which, of course, then appears to be Neo. And this seems odd to me. One, why Neo would just stand there and be casually walking through the halls. My guess is that she disguised herself as Oscar, was just walking casually, not to seem suspicious, maybe thought that the real Oscar was unconscious, and she's searching for RWBY at this point. Because she has the relic, now she just needs to find RWBY and kind of fulfill her own goals now that her and Cinder's goals has been achieved. But yeah, this doesn't last long as Oscar's able to run up, punch her in the face, break her illusion, and also the relic falls off of her hip, so Oscar's able to get it back. Jaune, Ren, and Nora are able to recognize Neo, and so this conflict is probably going to happen next episode. There's only one episode left of Volume 7, and there's a few things that are being set up here. One is this fight between, Team Alpine and Neo, but also we cut back to Penny and Winter as they're in the Winter Maiden's room, in Freya's room. And Freya is in one of those chambers that was at the side of her room. Similar to Volume 3, where the Fall Maiden powers were going to be transferred from Amber to Pyrrha. This is what's going to happen from Freya to Winter. And, Winter is conflicted with her feelings, even though Penny is bringing up that, well, I thought you said they shouldn't matter. Well, they're what keeps us human. Wrestling with our feelings makes sure that we're on the right path. Also, it should make you question whether you're on the right path or whether a different path is the correct one, but still, and she's resolved interactions even if it means Freya has to die. But before they get any further, the room starts shaking. They run out and they see Cinder. And Winter immediately knows as a fireball's screaming towards her face that she's outclassed. She cannot fight a maiden. Cinder has had enough time to train with her powers and learn to control them, so yeah, they're not in a great situation. So Cinder walks into the room saying, good, both of Ironwood's puppets. And now she's threatening Penny to leave nothing behind this time, making sure that she'll never be rebuilt, and so Penny is preparing to confront Cinder. So I'm wondering if it's going to be Cinder versus Penny while Winter tries to get the Winter Maiden powers, and if she does get the Winter Maiden powers, tries to come to Penny's aid or something, or whether Penny might actually get the Winter Maiden powers. I mentioned this at the end of last episode's review, and I think that might be an option, though, as some people pointed out, Penny got her aura from Pietro, who is an elderly man. So, frankly, the Maiden powers shouldn't be able to go to her. Just in and of itself, not even being an artificial human being, but still. Unless maybe there's some way for Penny to follow her Pinocchio path and become a real girl, maybe through magic or a relic or something like that, then there's a possibility, but, you know, that's future conjecture and possibly for different videos. As we cut to the last scene of the entire episode, which is, you know, the most impactful one and one that is reminiscent of things that happened in the events of Volume 3, as Qrow and Tyrion are fighting Qrow and are actually fighting alongside each other. Like, Qrow and Tyrion are making a good team, which I assumed the second that they paired up that Tyrion was going to backstab Qrow. Maybe not the best choice of words. I thought that Tyrion was going to turn on Qrow and take him out and then turn to Clover, but no, they actually fight together to the point where they do end up defeating Clover. At one point, Qrow's weapon gets flung away, and you know, that doesn't always matter to Qrow, as we know already from his fight with Tyrion back in Volume 4. Qrow seems to have a pretty iron fist. My guess is this incorporated into Qrow's semblance. He uses his bad luck or misfortune on the enemy to make sure that he hits a vital spot, as this punch knocks Clover all the way backwards and completely breaks his aura. Now, Clover turns to Qrow, or Qrow says, you know, why couldn't you just make the right choice instead of doing just what you were told? And Clover says sometimes making the right choice is the hardest decision to make, which, yes, it is, but, you know, turning against, you know, your orders is probably a pretty hard decision, and I think would be the right choice. He trusts James Ironwood with his life, and wants to trust Qrow too with his life, which is immediately ended at that point as Tyrion had grabbed Qrow's weapon and plunged it through Clover's back. Clover is pretty much doomed at this point. Qrow is, you know, he's very pissed off at Tyrion. He's screaming that he's going to kill him, which is something that's probably going to happen in Volume 8, that Qrow, if he doesn't get blamed for Clover's murder, is going to go on the path of blood and vengeance. But Tyrion is saying, oh, just how you killed Clover, throws his weapon to the ground, Qrow's weapon that is, and it's just covered in Clover's blood. We see then that other ships from Mantle start to arrive. You know, the authorities are just on time. Tyrion takes off, and Qrow, wanting and swearing to go after him, goes to Clover in his dying moments, and Clover is on the ground bleeding and just not in a good situation. And this hurt. I felt this for sure. Like, I liked Clover as a character and I really didn't want him to die, but Clover was saying, you know, someone had to take the fall. Now, I'm assuming this meant that Qrow was going to be blamed for Clover's death or something like that, but Qrow resolves to say he'll make sure that Ironwood takes the fall. So Qrow's also going to go after Ironwood as well. Both Ironwood and Tyrion are on Qrow's radar, and, you know, depending on how things turn out, this is going to be really interesting to see. You know, Clover, his very last words to Qrow were good luck, saying, you know, good luck in your endeavors to go after Ironwood, etc. Or maybe good luck in saying, in a sarcastic way, saying, I don't think you'll be able to do it, because Clover was very loyal to James. I'm not exactly sure how this was intended, but Clover then dies. We see the light fade from his eyes, and Qrow is left in despair. And this is the last scene that we see, or the last image that we see of the entire episode. Now, this was pretty emotional. People are dying this volume, and this isn't the finale yet. I'm pretty sure that for next episode, there's going to be at least one more death. Probably with the Penny, Winter, and Cinder fight. I mean, we know that Freya's going to die. That's probably not going to come as a surprise, but I have a feeling that one of those three might die as well. I'm wondering what exactly Neo is going to do against all of Team Alpine, but, you know, we'll see. The most important thing, though, is that Qrow might be getting blamed for Clover's death, because his weapon was used to kill Clover. Why would Tyrion have his weapon? Well, Qrow was fighting alongside Tyrion. That's not going to be a good excuse. So I don't know how this is going to turn out. Whether the authorities... Well, first of all, there's an arrest warrant out for Qrow. So in and of itself, he's going to be detained when everyone comes, and he's probably going to give himself up willingly because Robin needs help. Or maybe he'll trust that the authorities will take Robin to get help and he'll just run off on his own. Or I don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but damn it, I was hoping that Qrow would not have to go through shit like this. It's like every volume there's been something bad that has happened to Qrow. Volume 4, he got poisoned. Volume 5, Leonardo Lionheart, someone that he trusted, was betraying him. He betrayed him, as well as finding out that all of the huntsmen and huntresses that he trusted in Haven were killed because of Leonardo sending them out on missions and, sending them to die. Then, in Volume 6, he found out Ozpin was hiding so much from him. And then in Volume 7, he looks like he's finally getting over his alcoholism, has given that up, found a partner he could trust, and then they kill him. Qrow has been through more shit than anyone in this series. Prove me wrong. I feel so bad for, Clover, of course, because he died, but also Qrow because he's had to go through all this. He finally found someone he could trust with the semblance of good luck, good fortune to counteract his misfortune, someone that he could actually trust fighting, and now this episode did shake me, and I have to give kudos to the writers. I didn't see the death coming in this way. I thought that someone was gonna die. If I had to choose, it would probably, my money would have been on, I hate to say it, but it would have been on Robin. I really would have hated Robin dying either. I didn't want anyone to die, let's be real. I thought Tyrion was going to die at some point, which is probably going to be Volume 8 now, but still, it was still shocking to me. And how things are going to turn out is going to be very interesting to see, and how it's written. There's a lot of shit that's going to happen in next episode that is going to be carrying on to Volume 8. Rooster Teeth has already said that Volume 8 is going to be a direct continuation of Volume 7, and it makes sense considering everything is set up here that they wouldn't be able to cover everything in enough detail even with a half-hour episode. Needless to say, I hope we get a half-hour episode, but, a lot of things have to happen. I'm wondering if Qrow is actually going to break away from Team RWBY and Team Alpine, after the events of Atlas have already concluded, and go on this path of vengeance. Follow Tyrion, and that's going to be his purpose moving forward. He's going to go back to the solo huntsman life with the sole goal of killing Tyrion. Assuming, of course, him and Tyrion survive to the end of the Atlas arc, because with all the shit that's happening to Qrow, I hope the writers don't kill him off. He needs to have some happiness in his life, other than just, having a friend briefly for a month or two and then the friend dying in front of him. But, we'll see how things play out. Then there's the fight between Team RWBY and the Aesops, where Team RWBY used their teamwork and trust in each other to win one over on the Aesops. The Aesops were, very emotional and arrogant during this fight. At least Elm and Harriet were. But Team RWBY was very calm and collected. Using all this to their advantage, they were able to come out on top. Not a single member of Team RWBY fell where all the Aesops were wiped out. I feel like there might be a couple people who are a bit upset about that, feeling that maybe at least one member of Team RWBY should have had their aura broken at the very least, or something like that. So what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below how you liked this episode, or how you felt when the death of Clover happened. What do you think is going to happen to Qrow? Do you think that he's going to be blamed for Clover's death? Do you think he's going to have to run? Do you think he's going to surrender himself? Do you think, how do you think that things are going to turn out for the finale? What do you think is going to be left for Volume 8? Who is going to get the Winter Maiden powers? The fight between Penny and Winter and Cinder, might end up with another death, and I have a feeling similar to Volume 3 where things aren't going to go that well for, the finale, and people are going to die either next episode or in Volume 8. I have a feeling Ironwood might go down, possibly Winter, hopefully not Penny, for sure. Freya. Tyrion might die. If Watts isn't dead already, he might die. I really hope Qrow doesn't die, but, you know, we'll see how things turn out. The fight between Neapolitan and Alpine, Cinder and Winter and Penny, as well as Qrow being blamed, and how Pietro and Maria are going to help. You know, there's a lot of stuff to look forward to, so let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Make sure to subscribe if you would like some more RWBY content. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.